This week on the Droids, we're still talking about the Rise of Skywalker and our reactions to the latest installment in the Skywalker saga, if you even want to call it that. What marketing department came up with that? Trevorrow, of course, came out with, he didn't release it, but Colin Trevorrow's script for his Episode 9 has been released and verified as the actual script for what he wanted to write. We're going to talk about that, as well as Rian Johnson and whether or not he's making his trilogy. Plus, we're shouting out some other pods you got to take a listen to this week, that, and so much more, all on the Droids.
What they throw.
Welcome back to the Droids You're Looking For, a Star Wars podcast. Alongside Ryan and Chris, I am Mike. And guys, wow, we're still all buzzing over here with Episode 9, Duel of Fates. It was the best movie we ever thought could be possible. It really crushed it.
Let
it's
me
incredible.
ask you, Chris, do you recognize this third person's voice?
It sounds... I haven't heard that voice for a long, long time.
I don't recall ever having a mic.
You know,
Welcome
when
back,
Babu
Mike.
Frick wipes your memory, you get lost for a while and take some time to find your way back. But fortunately, somebody writes an out for you that can easily restore your memory that has no consequences for what happens to you.
I have a question about that scene. What does he say when he comes back? He's like, oh.
He says, hey, C-3PO?
Yeah.
When he first comes back?
He like, or he
Like
comes...
when R2 restores
Yeah, he's
his
like,
memory?
oh, we have a dinner that we have to go to or something.
Oh, no,
Is that what he
I
says?
think he says, like, quick, we have to help Rey on the mission she's leaving on. You know, it's something like that.
Oh, it is? I thought it was like a reference to something that happened, because, I don't know.
I think
someone commented it takes him back to right before Rey's mission, which means that they erased the Last Jedi from his memory, literally.
That's terrible.
Did you guys know? Here's a fun
No.
piece of trivia. Did you know that Babu Frick, the voice of him, is the same actress that does Moaning Myrtle from the Harry Potter
I heard
Really?
that actually today, yeah.
Yeah, isn't that awesome?
She's
wonderful.
fantastic. She's in a
great.
she's in a great movie called Intermission, where
Dude, I was just about to say that.
I
Steak,
love that
sauce,
film.
and coffee.
Exactly. And she's got a Ronnie, and that's a whole storyline with her and her mom. Very fun stuff.
Here's that. I'm so glad you referenced it. Love that movie. Very underrated.
Yes.
A fun fact about that movie. Roger Ebert's review, which is very, very favorable of it. I'm doing this from memory. This is true. He says that there are several bad movie ideas in Intermission that somehow add up to a good movie.
I believe
That's
that.
great.
accurate. Yeah.
Well,
Great Colin Farrell performance too.
I still think that opening scene, and I won't ruin it for anybody who hasn't seen Intermission, but check that movie out, because that opening scene is one of the most unexpected moments I feel like I've had as a moviegoer in the last 10 or 15 years. I don't know when that movie came out, but I didn't see it right away. But it was
about
just
35 years.
it really caught me completely off guard and set a tone for the movie where I was kind of just like giddy in my seat, like, oh, I'm in for something. I'm in for an experience, and it really paid off.
There you go.
Yeah, that's a rad movie.
Mike's back.
Same
Already
director as
given
Brooklyn.
Already given recommendations.
Really? Same director as Brooklyn. Wow.
Really?
Yeah. Speaking of recommendations,
Well, I recommend getting a Mickey Mouse Stormtrooper tattoo, like we all have. Mine is an indiscreet spot. I will not disclose. But I heard the pod and I thought, well, the three of them have already gone out and done it. I better go get mine.
It's very clear Mike
right.
didn't continue listening past that point. I do appreciate that you ran away as soon as you could to get it.
That's actually how I operate. If you say something, Chris, I jump.
Wow. How high?
in a place only reserved for lovers and podcast partners.
Well, so you three have been talking, as I would expect, at length about the Rise of Skywalker. It has been cathartic, I think, for a lot of people. Going back and listening to you talk when I couldn't join. Obviously, I was kind of like yelling at my phone, thinking I could still talk to you. But it really, you touched on so many things that had been nagging at me, so much about the film that I really needed to hear discussed, and I have to tip my cap to all of you, because you really really laid it out pretty well for what all the failings of this movie.
Took a few weeks.
And a meow to you too, Mike.
Yep. Yeah.
I don't know. I won't go too much into too much. We've been talking about this movie endlessly. We've done the instant reaction. There's been 2 podcasts after that now that you could have listened to. If you haven't gone back, hear our reactions, hear what we thought initially about the movie. I want to add to the conversation. I don't think we need to go for the rest of the episode because we are going to talk about this leaked script, which I think really proves a lot of things that we have to discuss about what could have been, whether that's good or bad, about what Trevorrow and what Derek Connolly would have done.
It's news to me that it was verified.
So
I'm glad I'm listening to the pod.
2 different film blogs, if you want to take that for whatever it is, have said that it was a verified script. So usually
it's not Cosmic Book News.
No, one of them was Slash Film.
Dang you, Cosmic Book News.
One of them was Slash Film, and I don't recall the other. But very much like any other journalistic practice, I take 2 sources and I say it's true.
Wait
a second. If one of them's Peter Soretta is worth 2 sources alone.
Wait, did you get it from Trevorrow with 1R.com?
Yeah, that was the one. That was the one.
What if the 2 sources got it from the same place? That's a classic newsroom problem.
Let's do a walk and talk. I wish you could do a walk and talk podcast. You know what? If you're listening to this, get up. Start walking around. It'll be like a walk and talk.
Talk back to us while you do it.
You know what? Get the blood flowing. We should be walking around.
Yeah, what are we doing?
We'll be the first ever walking podcast.
Well, if you want to send us your walk and talk, you can do that at droidspod@gmail.com. Twitter, DroidsPod. Instagram, DroidsPod. The Droids Podcast on Facebook. Check out YouTube, the Droids playthrough that Ryan has done for Fallen Order. It's all worth your time, but check us out on all those different platforms. Again, send us something. Send us your walk and talk. We'd love to hear from you. I had a couple of things that I don't recall. Obviously, there's a lot of topics that we've all touched on in the last few weeks and that you've touched on while I've been out of the pod. But I don't recall much of a conversation about Finn and what could have been with his Stormtrooper storyline. As in, I've seen this from a couple of different publications, people talking about it, is if this story would have been him and Janna working together when they approached Stormtroopers who theoretically they had potentially pre-existing relationships with, and in some sort of finale conclusion battle could have had the chance to take what were kidnapped children and conditioned to be Stormtroopers and then brought them back or brought them out of the First Order by witnessing or showing them what could have been for their lives, I think could have been a much more powerful statement about combating what was a tragic moment for the series, and not, rather than ignoring the fact that these people, you might be able to empathize with them, they just go and shoot all of them and kill them like they were just any other Stormtrooper, even though these characters themselves were Stormtroopers.
That would have been such like a powerful turnaround too, to like basically think that they're the enemy, but they're more complex than that.
Exactly. Well, which is what we got with the introduction of Finn in The Force Awakens.
Right.
Was one of the powerful ideas of, you've always thought a Stormtrooper was faceless and wasn't anyone and didn't have anything to say, and yet we're going to show you that one of them can be a hero. And yet they just continue onward like all the rest of them are faceless.
It is very surprising they did not follow that instinct, too, because that's a lot of the themes that you find in Clone Wars and Rebels and Resistance. It's kind of this, there's no good or bad. Everyone's kind of a gray area adapting to the situation.
I always think there's that phenomenal episode of Clone Wars where I think, is it Rex gets like crash landed on a planet and he finds a clone trooper that basically went AWOL.
Yes.
And like started a family.
Yep.
And I always thought that was such a brilliant episode because by the end they come to understand each other. He's, and I was like, this is like, what a thing to send to kids that it's, it's nuanced, it's and subtle for like, that kind of entertainment. And this is honestly, because we're so used to seeing people just shoot stormtroopers.
Right.
Like, it's not a thing that dawned on me until I was listening to a podcast that brought it up about how they so drive home this idea that stormtroopers are stolen from their families and they're brainwashed and stuff. And like, it's completely neglected. It's baffling now that it's been brought to my attention,
it's
Disney
one of the
Plus. Make a Stormtroopers show. Troopers.
You know what? We're probably going to get a Finn show. I wouldn't be surprised if we get a Disney Plus Finn show. You know that John Boyega is going to be down. Is he actually going to be in good standing with the fan base? That's a whole different conversation to be had.
A prequel show, right?
Yeah, another prequel. I would think that's probably likely. The other thing, you just think of the powerful moment of like, here we are in what is the final battle with the final order or first order, if you wouldn't have gone that way. But then stormtroopers.
Where's the middle order?
The stormtroopers maybe are all listening to an impassioned speech, and this maybe not be the best way to execute it, but somehow Finn and Janna, or Finn on his own, are convincing them, and you see them slowly drop their weapons to join them, or rather than drop their weapons, just change sides and continue the fight against the Emperor. That would have been something that would have been...
And then just think about a callback to We Are the Spark that ignites the fire.
Exactly. Which I think we'll talk a little bit more about with the Trevorrow and Connolly script, because I think there's an element in there where you think of the spark being snuffed out is kind of what Kylo Ren is supposed to be doing, which is a really interesting idea. But I felt like a lot of things in The Rise of Skywalker that were set up and then never paid off, or things in The Force Awakens and Last Jedi that were never paid off, that's one of the most glaring ones that I walk away with, what could have been?
Yeah. His character did not get much justice or like a nice kind of end cap, really.
No. Well, and he also tried to kill himself again, and this time they said Rose is going to be like, I'm good with it, I'll get on the transport.
She's like, oh, okay.
Well, which brings me to the other thing that I think we've talked about Rose. We talked about the limited screen time, minute 29, JJ calling her the biggest gift he ever got from Rian Johnson, and yet didn't really use her in the film. Quite insulting. But one of the things I've just thought about that I don't know if this has really been discussed is that the buddy moment between Finn and Rose, when Finn says, hey, you sure you don't want to come along? And she says, no, I'm going to hear and study all the plans. But then she says something like, when or if you come back, and he says when we come back, and he comes over and he puts his hand on her shoulder and gives her very much a buddy, we're coming back. And I thought, what a tragic moment for someone who now has an unrequited love for another character after what we saw in The Last Jedi, where she kisses him but then also talks about saving what you love.
Yeah.
And it just made me feel so absolutely devastated that they didn't even consider her to be a character to begin with, but a romantic character. And if you just internalize who that character is and what we've seen, her love interest's response to her was to ignore her and treat her like a buddy.
Yeah, they poorly handled.
Well, it made me so sad. It just made me.
Rose
is fictional, but I'm feeling for Rose and feeling very sad about it.
It's
well, as we know from JJ, kisses can be a brother sister thing.
It's definitely a kind of treason to the story they set up, and also just they made a relationship, and then they were like, well, we don't want that. I mean, if that was the first of many scenes of them kind of will they, won't they kind of thing.
Yeah.
Which is also a theme that's in Star Wars a lot. I mean, I could see something like that, but that was it. Nope, you stay home, Rose, and I'll go.
Well, I believe you talked about how Terrio said we just had to cut those scenes that she had with Leia because it wasn't working with the fidelity of the CGI to bring Leia back to life. Okay,
do you remember?
Sure.
My eyes have just rolled all the way back around.
I just thought of something.
It's an insane excuse.
Oh, well, because I mean, it was really easy when they got Peter Cushing to do Rogue One. Remember that?
Yeah, it was easy. Out of the tomb.
Oh, wait a second. Yeah, they made a CGI character. Like, I feel like that is. Why are they even speaking?
Yeah, they didn't have to do those interviews. I mean, those were things that jumped out at me. I do want to jump in on the Disney conversation that you guys were having, which I think up until this point we felt, and I know you said this, you felt very strongly that Disney had been doing a good job. And now, Ryan, I know you said you're kind of questioning where they go next. Are they going to be able to handle this? I still feel the same way. And maybe I'm very naive and very much brought up on Disney. And I recently have read Bob Iger's book, but I don't know what happened here, because I don't believe that Bob Iger would have come in and been like, I'm going to disrupt what you've written. I want you to do it this way, change all of it because this isn't working. Because I've kind of gotten the sense, and maybe, again, this is quite naive, but Bob Iger, I do think that he says what is the best financial move for our company is having stories and characters that people love for decades of their life, and they come to theme parks and they continue to purchase merchandise and they continue to be consumers of these properties and to potentially do. And actually, I loved what Sam had said about, hey, we got one movie to satisfy one group of fans and we got one movie to satisfy another group of fans. But to me, if you're going to possibly upset fans in the middle of that, you're not making the best business move to continue to make money off of this fan base. So I've kind of thought that Disney's move was, we're going to make quality and that's going to continue to make us money. And I still believe that even with this misfire. Yeah.
Sure.
I mean, I guess we'll see.
Yeah.
It's truly like one of those things where
I think it really,
we won't know until we know.
Yeah, I think it really depends on like kind of what happens next. I mean, we had Mandalorian running concurrently, and that ended net good. I think that was a fine example, and it kind of upheld some of the tenets of Star Wars, even though there was a little bit of a slump there. We're dealing with a little bit of a longer time period, though. It's first TV show, so there might be some waiting they have to go through and figure things out. But I'm excited for season 2. That'll kind of be like, your first album is always the easiest, right? So let's see if they had
Chris, I think there's a bunch of never have beens who would say that the first album wasn't easy at all.
Well, I mean, but they're saying the second album though is the truly hard one, because you use all your
the sophomore slump.
Yeah, you get all your goods out. So let's see what they bring with Disney Plus. I mean, I think we're going to be waiting in some Disney Plus series for the next half decade here before we actually get back into the movies.
Well, and I do share the concerns. I'm very much in the camp of, all right, what are they going to do now? Because if this is what they decided was their direction, and is Kathleen Kennedy even going to be the sure hand anymore? Because was she on this? Was she overruled? Did somebody? I can't understand how the people who made the first two movie made this movie. And we've talked about it. You've mentioned it several times. What involvement did the story group have? They might have had none, because Wayfinder, Sith Holocron, why were they two different things? I mean, it just didn't seem like a movie. And you talked about they've now...
Poe's background isn't canon.
Exactly.
Isn't in line with what canon was.
Exactly. You talked about how canon has sort of just been decided to be thrown out the window. And I think both of you were saying this is that new era where maybe canon doesn't matter as much, which is sort of terrifying as a diehard Star Wars fan.
Yeah, I think they kind of wanted. To me, it feels like they wanted just to wrap this whole thing up so they can just move on and do whatever they want to do next without kind of the deep-seated connection.
Boy, never
Sad.
Something I would have thought we would have found in Star Wars.
Dark Days of the Empire.
This may be the darkest timeline.
But you know what? We'll get back. I always keep thinking, though, it's like, as far as fandom goes, and I listen, I think they're funny and anyone could enjoy it, but like Star Wars for a while was just treated as like a parody for many years, and some of those parodies were not very nice or friendly, and they were kind of the canon, and Star Wars itself wasn't so sacred. So this stuff goes in waves where it becomes a sacred territory, and then it comes back to it being just something everyone makes fun of and laughs with. So
I never thought I would
all part of the show.
I never thought I would long for the days where I wasn't so open about my Star Wars fandom with people who were not Star Wars fans, because I was worried that they were going to be negative about Star Wars.
Right.
But at that point, at least I knew, like, if I met a Star Wars fan, well, we were going to talk about it and love it and whatever. And now, we don't have that. You
right.
could be another Star Wars fan who's coming from a place you don't want to go to.
Right.
No,
it's all over. It's the new era.
Well, speaking of the new era, we don't know what's next, but we know Rian Johnson was supposed to be making a trilogy. He recently had comments after Knives Out and after he was nominated for Best Original Screenplay for Knives Out, which is incredible, which is awesome. I hope that he pulls it off, but you pretty much know they're going to give it to Tarantino anyway. He mentioned in his comments that he has not been in touch with Star Wars, and Star Wars has not announced anything, which doesn't bode well. And with this release of The Rise of Skywalker, with moments that clearly retcon The Last Jedi, I can't imagine that Rian Johnson will be making these movies. I feel like it's all done except for the actual announcement. I don't think he's making any more Star Wars.
It feels far away.
Yeah.
Yeah, it feels like that was an announcement they made before The Last Jedi, I believe, right?
Yep.
And then, whatever happened in the fandom happened, and then it just seems like, honestly, I'd be surprised if he wanted to go back. It's this whole, I mean, we've talked about it a bunch, but like this whole press tour for this movie has been such a mess in terms of how people have been spoken about that have worked on the movies, how people have spoken about the movies themselves, the way that the cast has treated each other, has treated some like sects of the fandom, like it's just been this really strange, like, remember when The Force Awakens came out and the press tour was just like all celebration?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then even, this kind of started when The Last Jedi and Mark Hamill felt the need to say that he disagreed so much with the take of Luke Skywalker. And then it's just this, I thought that this most recent press tour was like next level in terms of just like disaster.
Do you remember when we were talking, it was probably post The Force Awakens and pre-Last Jedi, it was like, how big can this thing get? Like, how much enveloped in our world? And I think what we're seeing is that it got so big that it got out of its vessel. Like it got out of control. Mm-hmm. There's no more focal point for Star Wars fandom anymore.
Do you think we've reached the peak of the blockbuster era, as in this year with Disney and Endgame, and even though we didn't love what happened with Star Wars, but with those two movies, I don't know if we're ever going to hit the high. And I know that money-wise, financially, we'll continue to see big budgets. That I think inflation, you'll see the ticket prices go up. But I think we maybe have reached this tipping point where I don't know that blockbuster cinema is going to be the same after this.
Do you know? And I don't want to get ahead of this, but you know what it's starting to feel like? And I think that the Rise of Skywalker, it may have been different if for me, I had felt different about it, like my experience in this. Yeah. But like when there's road trip movies, and it's essential to a road trip movie and like to road trips in general, that kind of the last third is about how it's all gone on too long.
Mm-hmm.
It's like there's if
home.
you look at like Almost Famous, like it's magic, and then there's the point where it's like, this needs to end. Like I need to go home. This is not fun anymore.
Yeah.
That's what blockbusters like these huge movies are starting to feel like. Like if Endgame was kind of the apex of like this is where it gets to. We're kind of in that point where it's like, okay, like maybe this is like a bit much.
Well, it's also we're constantly like middling in the same like 5 ideas also, right? It's like Star Wars, Marvel, Batman, whatever other like 4 or 5 different franchises that kind of control the pop culture comic book sense. Like we have to break out of that cycle somehow. Like you can only bring back the nostalgic tones of these things so many times. Like movies are basically turning into like I equating it to like fashion as an art form, where it's like you see clothing now is inspired by decades previous, but there was a point in time where that didn't happen. And so now, but now like clothing seems to be stuck in like the last 50 years. Like we're just kind of recycling that. We goes back to the 80s, back to the 70s. So
Chris,
I feel
if there are 3 guys who should weigh in on fashion trends, it is us.
It's us. Well, I mean, I'm wearing sweatpants right now. That never go out of style.
You're wearing
pants? But I feel like maybe oh no. I feel like cinema might be approaching just because it is a pretty young art form as far as the world's concerned. And so I think maybe cinema is hitting this point where it's starting to become self-referential. It's starting to depend on its previous works to build something new. Mm-hmm. And like you said, this could have been a peak year for the idea of a blockbuster film. Like, sad to say,
money-wise, it was.
Money-wise, it certainly was. And it's kind of like what the stories with the content and the medium, they've been done almost to the point of is there any more things to pull out? And I'm sure creative people will say yes, and we'll see those in years to come. But it has to hit a point where we take a break.
Well, that's such an interesting thing about that, because I would have said that 2 years ago, I thought, wow, there are more stories to tell. There's more directions to take these blockbusters after what The Last Jedi did. That there's room for us to be challenged. There's room for us to have more thought-provoking films that are in these franchises that we love. And with the reaction and the direction and where things went in Episode 9, it seems like that wasn't what the studios and some of the fan base wanted, so that's now where we are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a strange thing, and it's like if you read like critic reviews of the late, the Rise of Skywalker, a lot of it, because The Last Jedi was critically incredibly well received, and a lot of critics on this one were commenting on the fact that like it's very strange that they backtracked after one of the most interesting blockbusters to come out in years and did this, and it is like it sent me into this kind of like existential crisis because I'm thinking about it, and it's just like what I truly don't like. What do people want? And I suppose there is this element of they want to see that what they have liked is valid or something to that effect. I'm trying to like find the empathetic into this, but I'm not sure. Listen, there was a thing. There's something that's been grinding my gears that I kind of need to bring up on here, and like
here we go. Yeah,
which is a Star Wars podcast that I am not a fan of at all. They didn't, despite the fact that I'm about to quote something that they said, and I've listened to it. And they specifically said, we're so excited that we can finally talk about a Star Wars movie on the merits of it being a Star Wars movie and not a litmus test for your worldview or something like that. Like in this very angry way, essentially implying that The Last Jedi, like, keep your politics out of my Star Wars kind of stuff. And I found it truly maddening because the quote-unquote politics of The Last Jedi are not like these huge overt like controversial statements.
No.
It's like, hey, everybody deserves a chance in this life and we all should like try to save what we love. So to imply that Star Wars is just like what you think it should be, which is like something that represents only you as a white man and like it's a baffling statement. And like I heard that, and obviously it's not only them who was saying it. That's like a vocal part of the fandom who have complained about these things. And again, and Rian Johnson has said this, we're not talking about people who like think the Canto Bight sequence is a little bloated. Like there are people who are railing against The Last Jedi, and it's for clear reasons. And also, it's implying that Star Wars wasn't political before, which is like, of course it's not overtly political the way that like Apocalypse Now was, but if you look at like the original trilogy, right, the first movie came out in 1977 in the wake of Vietnam, and it's about this huge it's about a government that pulled the wool over the eyes of its people, that was a republic and became a tyranny or a tyrannic, a totalitarian state, and has convinced everyone that they are living in a democracy, but they are not. Right? And then the second one came out the year of the Reagan election, and it's about how a small rebellion, after a small victory against this tyrannical government, lose. It's about how they all lose. And then the third movie comes out in the midst of the Reagan era, and it's about how our main character is trying to decide whether he should stick with the morals that he believes that he believes in, or give in to the mistakes of his father, which to me is like a direct analogy for the baby boomers of the time. Right?
And should they stick with, and now still works.
And now, of course, but it's like, and of course, the entire like Revenge of the Sith is a direct analogy for the Bush era.
You're either with us or you're against us.
Yeah, this is how democracy dies, to thunderous applause. So it's like, listen, these don't have to be overt things, but I'm telling you, if Star Wars came out, like the original Star Wars, some people call it A New Hope, came out today, I guarantee you Fox News would have a thing about how studio films are trying to turn your kids into terrorists.
Yeah.
It's just like what it is. So it's like, if people feel like, it's just, I don't know what people want, from this.
Well,
and it's really maddening to me.
it's been described as obviously trying to placate everybody and trying to make everybody happy. Doesn't make any sense. But I think in our current cultural, political landscape, it is very clear that you cannot get to the point where you're going to get a universally beloved anything anymore. And I just think that there is a certain group of our current culture and political landscape that, to be honest, they're never going to be happy with anything that moves culture and progressiveness forward. They don't want to see a new state of our existence where there is more opportunity and more acceptance and more ability for people to move forward who are beyond what they already know and what they represent.
And also, I want to clarify, I don't know how the guys feel truly. What I do know, though, is that statement was putting forth an idea that they should be aware of, is that they should know that that's coming off as siding with a certain aspect of fandom that is toxic. I don't know if they actually feel that way. I can't speculate on that. It would be unfair. But what I'm saying is when they say something like that, they need to know how that is coming across and what they are validating.
Well, but exactly what you're saying is, I think, also what needed to be directed at J.J. Abrams and Chris Terrio. That when you eliminate the character of Rose, you are validating the worst type of people who wanted that character gone.
Yeah, I think it was we talked about this on like a micro level when like Mark Hamill tweets something where we're just he always comes back and says, "That was just a frivolous statement," but it's like, no, like the weight of what this does to the community is like it starts to create these divergences where it's like us versus them. Yeah, that's right. This thing needs to be fixed. Yeah, that's not right. Like it creates these rifts, and it's something that I thought Star Wars was above, and so it's been very interesting to find this because I just you can like almost like pinpoint the moment. We saw Last Jedi. We came back. We were talking about it on the pod, loving it. And then like the next day, we saw that there was like an outcry of people that did not enjoy it. And we were all just like, what? What is this?
Yeah.
And we didn't quite understand what was happening.
Ryan,
it's Russian propaganda.
I want to take a moment, though, and say that was very well said and very well put. And I think there's so much to continue to unpack there. I just loved hearing the take you had on it. So another tip of my cat.
I appreciate it. And again, I'm not trying to speak for anybody or attack anybody. It's just it's a thing that, you know, for people who have voices of and fandom is listening, I just felt like it was a really irresponsible thing to say.
Yep. Especially for the most popular Star Wars podcast, or at least the top search result when you search Star Wars podcast.
Yeah, and I apologize to my fellow podcasters here if we're all about to get doxxed.
My address.
Can I give a shout out to two podcasts that I listened to though that were like that I thought were so great. One came to me via Sam, who's not with us today. He's still on the earth.
I was going to
say Scavenger's Horde, which is a huge podcast, so they certainly don't need a shout out from. I just want to, anybody if there's a chance that there's a listener who has not heard of this, I want to get their ears on it. They did a recap of The Last Jedi, of Rise of Skywalker, with their feelings about it. They obviously they had very mixed feelings, and they explain beautifully why, and they go through it beat by beat. It's a 4-hour podcast, and every minute of it is enthralling. So you should absolutely listen to that. And the other one is Women of the Wills, also a very popular podcast. Don't need a shout out from us, but they did an episode. I want to get the title right. It's called "The Life of Female Fans," and they talk about the experience of being a female Star Wars fan right now. They talk about they go into the idea of the Reylo community, which has gone so much further than just shipping those two characters. It's come to mean so much to so many people, and they talk about why it has come to mean so much to so many people, and why the new movie feels a little bit like a betrayal. And it's just it's absolutely essential listening, and I recommend it to everyone, especially male fans. They do like great things in educating and just I just thought it was a beautiful piece of work. So please go listen to that. They were awesome.
I think that's really, I mean, as we do this podcast and we are just four guys sitting around talking about Star Wars, we hope to listen
alternate title
and
for the
listen
podcast as well.
Listen to more podcasts like the two you just mentioned, and also hopefully maybe invite them on. They have certainly many episodes they're recording, but we'd love to have a conversation with them as well.
Official invite sent.
Ryan, you talked about Revenge of the Sith being a commentary in the Bush era. So who had the high ground in the Bush? Was it Cheney?
Who was he? No, Obi.
Certainly not that guy he shot.
Yeah, I was gonna say Obi-Wan had a lightsaber, Mike, not a shotgun. That's interesting.
Obi-Wan was trying. He didn't mean to hit Anakin. He was aiming for a goose behind him.
Oh God.
Well, let's talk about Duel of Fates, the possible, never likely, didn't happen Star Wars film that is apparently, again, this script by a couple of different movie blogs, take it for what you will, have verified that this script exists. I've not read the entire script. I think none of us have. We've read some cliff notes. We've got some idea.
I was
of what
looking for it. I couldn't find it.
So that's interesting because some publications must have it because they've got a lot of details from it, and they even have some dialogue, but it's not as easily readily available. This was from 2016. Apparently, it was about a few weeks before Carrie Fisher passed away, so the role of Leia was still very prominent, meant to be larger, wasn't going to be done with CGI in any way. But there's some interesting takes in here. There's the direction. It starts off with the crawl, and the crawl is mostly intact for what a lot of these publications have shared. And it's interesting because it's mostly about Kylo Ren trying to silence the communication among planets so that not only can they not fight back against the First Order, which is now cracked down, and anything is now sacrificing your life if you stand against the First Order in any way, but also it's described as when you cut out the communication, the story and the spark of hope of Luke Skywalker cannot spread. And to me, that is a very interesting idea, that Kylo would know the importance of what happened and how it could hurt the First Order's chances. And with him still being the big bad in this script, I think that would have been a really appealing thing and compelling story to watch as Kylo tightens his grip, but everything Star System still slipped through his fingers.
Yeah. So there were a few... Sorry.
I was going to say that movie, that plot reminds me of, there was a movie with Jude Law that came out, probably 2 decades ago called Enemy at the Gate.
Oh, it was like Sky Captain?
Sky Captain in the World of Enemy at the Gate, and it was about a sniper in World War II who his acts were recorded by the newspaper, so he was kind of partners with the guy that was running the newspaper in the local town, and basically he was acting as an inspiration for the town. And then the newspaperman started just like writing stories about him, and it became the inspiration for the town, and it got the people to like revolt and kind of rally around him. So that's a very similar kind of like, that is a tried and true tale.
So there were a few things about this script breakdown that were compelling to me. The first thing is that I don't think it was perfect in terms of like...
Oh, no. Yeah.
There are things in it that I was like, that's not, again, I mean, that's not the definition of perfect, is like not what I would want. But there, specifically at the end, the fact that they can't redeem Ben, I was like, well, I don't feel great about that. But there were a few things that were super compelling to me. The first is that Luke's Force Ghost was appearing to both Rey and Kylo Ren.
Yes.
And I thought that was really interesting.
Oh, that's fun.
That he kept kind of trying to persuade Kylo Ren and kind of almost like annoy him through his journey.
Yeah.
That was really cool. The second is that Coruscant was featured heavily.
Loved it.
And I love that stuff. I'm a big old Coruscant boy.
I really want to know what it looks like post Battle
Me too.
of Yavin.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and to see like what it's like for them to be, basically rebuilding after a totalitarian regime was controlling their city.
Does Dex still have his diner?
No,
exactly.
We know that from canon, he died a horrible death.
Oh, no.
Oh, God.
Well, the diner could still be there.
And the other thing was the how they split the characters up. So they in the breakdown, there's like a Reddit thread, but it says like Team A, Team B. And Team A, I believe, is Finn, Rose, R2, and C-3PO. And then Team B is Rey, Poe, and BB-8.
Oh, interesting.
And I thought that was a really interesting kind of dynamic to do. Also, it was building off The Last Jedi because Finn and Rose are supposed to be these close characters,
Right,
and it's interesting because Rey and Poe haven't spent that much time together. So that could be an interesting kind of, tension, and then Finn and Rose are continuing the close relationship that they had formed in The Last Jedi. So to me, it certainly seemed more... all in all, it seemed way more interesting and more like someone was trying to tell a story. I also understand that I've gone on record as saying that I never wanted to see Colin Trevorrow's script, but you know what? It's 2020. We're living in different times now.
You are right. I
we're
never thought
we're in a post-Trost world.
I never thought I'd want to read anything like this, but after that, you're right. After seeing this movie, I'm like, all right, all bets are off. I will definitely indulge. There's also in this script, Rey would meet the Knights of Ren and fight and defeat the Knights of Ren, which reminded me in the vision that Rey has in The Force Awakens. Everything that happens in that vision, with the exception of her encounter with Kylo and the Knights of Ren, actually has happened in the films. And they left that hanging. This script...
Are you talking in her Force back?
Yeah, well, her Force back and Force forward, because...
Sure.
Remember, she was, at one point, she comes upon tons of down corpses with Kylo standing with the Knights of Ren. And I thought that could have been a very
if that was a
moment where she eventually does confront them. And I thought that would have come back, especially when it felt like that was the only thing hanging from that Force back that we didn't see in The Last Jedi. I thought, oh, okay, this is a great opportunity for JJ to do this and have that moment. And nope, forget it.
I thought it was cool that the name of their ship was the Knife 9.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and what's really funny to me is that, like, Kylo Ren has his own TIE silencer, but the Knights of Ren all have to share a ship. So I imagine them like the Power Rangers in, like, one big room.
Right.
Well, isn't the...
when they make the Megazord?
Isn't that ship that's at Galaxy's Edge the TIE silencer from Colin Trevorrow's script? Because they had to build things so early with the park that was what they thought they were working from. And so they created that ship that Kylo comes out of in his performances at Galaxy's Edge is from Trevorrow's script.
Wow.
Wait, is it different than the TIE silencer that we know him to have? Oh,
it looks totally different.
I haven't seen that. I have to look it up.
Yeah. I mean, not totally different, but it's different.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, we'll never see it.
I believe.
Also, Mortis was in there. May explain Matt Smith's, series
his involvement with the series.
But the climax happens on Mortis.
Oh, okay.
Oh.
In the script breakdown.
So the idea is that he gets a holocron, right, and then goes to Mustafar, and then gets the holocron, and then it takes him to the Death Star, and then apparently he reads Palpatine's last will and wishes. And Palpatine says, hey, I was trained by this guy, you have to go find him.
Yes.
And then basically what happens is it becomes a race to find that guy.
Yeah, and I forget what the name of it was, but it's really interesting.
He had like a new name, yeah.
It's like a super old dude.
Wasn't it like Tall of or something like that?
Yeah.
And then there was an aspect where Poe brings Rey to basically a reader that can pull information out of people's memories, so she can access information from her Force times with Kylo.
That's what Kylo was able to do in The Force Awakens. He can read Rey's mind.
Right, but she's able to access parts of people's memory that like they don't know they have.
Right.
Which is all this is like really cool.
Yeah,
it's like not that there's stuff in the oh my god, I keep saying that in the Rise of Skywalker that wasn't cool, but it's this to me felt like reading it. I was like this is like a big story that has like weird
Valum
stuff
is
in
his
it.
name. Yeah,
there you go.
Sorry to interrupt.
But it felt
so I
like
just made up a name, Chris. Is that what I did?
No, you're close.
Just reading it, it felt like, and I know it's easy to like read it on paper, and you can imagine the perfect version of it in your head. But
right.
It read like this big, weird story
what
that
they
I
didn't-
think sounded cool.
What they didn't tell you is that this was Terrio wrote this last week. I thought all the Constable Zuvio stuff was great.
Did you ever get that action figure?
No, I never got the Zuvio.
Oh, I'm sure you could get it pretty easily. I think
Now
they're
it's
still
probably
on
on the
some
cheap.
shelves.
Do you think maybe it's worth like $1 trillion?
It's probably in one of those bins at Walmart at the bottom.
Yep, I think you could get it.
What do we?
That and Snoke. I always seem to see
Yeah.
Snoke hanging around a lot of.
How do we feel about the name Duel of Fates?
I don't. I mean,
Too on the nose? Is it?
it's we've
I
never.
think it's a little meta because
Yeah,
it's like the
exactly.
name of a song.
Right.
It's like if they named it like Star Wars Episode 9, Star Wars Fanfare.
Opening theme, closing song. They should have called it closing song.
But it almost the script, and we haven't read the whole thing. Maybe either one of you have heard something more. But this with the title, it's like, okay, we're going to get something more about the prequels, and we're going to have that be more prominent in here.
Yeah.
And the only thing prequel-wise was kind of alluding to Darth Plagueis, which it was parts of the Sith are unnatural. But really, the voices that Rey hears in Rise of Skywalker, yes, Ahsoka's in there. I think a couple other Rebel characters are in there. But how do they not indulge in making many different types of fans happy when Lando arrives with this new fleet of people, as the First Order or the Final Order calls them, and show us someone besides Wedge. Show us Cara Syndulla. Show us Ezra. Show us Resistance. I think, Chris, you said this in the text.
Kaz.
Why
Yeah.
not show the Resistance ace pilots? Show
They would've-
somebody to pay off all these other fan bases.
Resistance is literally designed to run right up to the Rise of Skywalker.
It's baffling. It reminds me again that I feel like this movie was made by people who never cared about anything but the original trilogy.
Also, we haven't talked about this. I thought that Wedge cameo was so lame. And this is nothing against Wedge. I'm a Wedge. I love Wedge. But like
You're a Wedge salad kind of guy.
just like the execution, like nice
Yeah.
flying, Lando. Like
It's like, what
the
are they?
hell?
Were they buddies or what? Like, did they even talk to each
Would
other?
they even know each other? Well, I guess they would because Lando
He was their
led
general.
the raid on the last Death Star.
Yeah.
But it's just like,
Yeah.
why would Wedge be at the gunner? Shit. Like,
Yeah, he was a pilot. He was a great pilot, wasn't he?
He's old. He got
yeah,
old.
he was. Wasn't he Red Leader?
At one point, probably, yeah.
You know, he's had a long. I just also
Yeah,
yet
no, I
again
agree.
a
Yeah.
guy wearing the same clothes that we saw him wearing 40 years ago.
There is a clothing issue in the universe of Star Wars. There's a finite amount of clothing, and that the characters just recycle through to one another. And maybe
just
that's
think it's
something
like
in the
if you-
future.
Listen, I'll buy it like a cartoon if like Rey and Finn and Poe are wearing like similar stuff for the three
Yeah.
movies. You know, because it's like I wore the same kind of T-shirts for 5 years. You know, like that
I
kind
still
of thing.
am, yeah.
But to have Wedge, like, think about how
Yeah.
how stupid a fan service that is. That they're showing Wedge in the same outfit.
It's like,
They think you're dumb.
well, he's
That's
like,
the
he's
thing,
like,
guys.
It's
They
like
think
him
you're
putting
dumb.
on his it's like him putting on the tux from his wedding night, or like
Yeah,
oh,
it
this will
still
still
fits.
fit. Yeah, like right, yeah. That's a little an odd choice that only
It's like our cameos. It's like they have to be wearing the same thing because then people would be like, Lando wasn't wearing a cape. That's not my Lando.
But it's just like, also with a Wedge cameo, it's like, oh, cool, you were very happy that like 15 people saw that. Like, who was that for? That's
it had no like purpose. Like, you know what was cool in like Rogue
Yeah.
One when they used the footage of like
Yeah.
the old pilots because there was
Yeah.
a motivated reason for them to be there.
yep.
Wedge should be dead.
Should be hanging out with Dex.
And Snap Wexley.
Snap. Well,
Well,
he
so
got
His
what was-
nephew. He had no reaction.
I assume that's why Chewie was crying when Chewie came back.
Cause Snap.
This reminded me though of something I wanted to say earlier that I don't know has been discussed. This film posits that Lando and Chewie flying by in what is presumably moments or sending out a message as they fly by planets to get people to join them is more important than Leia sending out a message at the end of The Last Jedi. That they care more about the general man than the general woman who asked them to come and fight. Because no one arrives at the end of The Last Jedi, and yet they all arrive in droves for good old Lando.
Right.
Yeah, it's problematic.
There's some kind of history rewriting there. It's like, what? She had the wrong number? What did he do? And also,
well, here's the thing.
Why didn't he answer that call?
In the Trevorrow, yeah, that's really a big one. In the Trevorrow treatment, Leia asks Lando to get she says, we need you to gather the smugglers to help us. And I was like, that's motivated. That
would have been
sense.
Great.
Put in a scene where he's talking to Conja Club.
I was just going to say, that to me is one of the biggest misses. I was looking so forward. As soon as I found out J.J. Abrams was directing this,
You're such a Conja Club head.
I thought these gangs were coming back, because how great would it be that when they find out that, like, Kylo Ren kills Han Solo, that they're both like, wait, he killed Han Solo? He owes us money. He owes us the ship. And now you have an enemy against the First Order. Like, it would have been...
That's great.
It would have been perfect. It would have been similar...
But then people would be like, they're not treating the death of Han Solo with enough reverence.
Right. They need respect. You remember in Return of the Jedi when he's practically winking and nodding at the camera?
You know what I want to know? Where's Duquesne in all of this?
What about the Irving boys?
Where's Tito?
What about the Irving boys?
Honestly, I think of all the characters, Tito probably ended up the best.
Is Unkar Plot still alive?
Yeah. He seemed to know a lot about Rey's origin also. Why didn't we get to see him in some kind of Revenge, or was it Attack of the Clones when we see Watto again? And he's like, Annie? Like, why didn't we get to see Unkar Plot kind of being like, what? That girl?
Watto really waves that off about Annie's mother, where he's like, business is business.
They all, you know what, that whole plot line is very strange, too, because all the Jedi seem okay with it, too. They're like, well, we can't really do much about this one. Sorry.
Sorry about that. We can just pull out our lightsaber and kill Watto in a second and take her
they
with
should
us,
be cutting Watto in half.
So the Jedi are okay with enslaving people, but they're not. But some people
you can't interfere in the business of others.
Yeah, even though they rotated those dice. Anyhow,
there's that weird part in Phantom Menace where she's like, Annie, if I follow you, I'll explode.
Yeah, basically, it's one of those situations. The floor is lava, can't touch it.
Also, I just found out that first planet that they're in the Rise of Skywalker is Mustafar. What's that about?
That's so weird. That is such a weird
We've all agreed
choice.
that every Star Wars planet has one climate, and everything looks the same on that planet. Well, that's supposed to be Mustafar, and there's like all these trees and stuff.
Yeah. What was it? They tried to put some trees up or something on Mustafar. Like, oh yeah, it doesn't work. We tried it, and then
we should always have the visual dictionary tell us important things about the story of the movie that we watched, because you can't get it all in the film. It has to be also out there.
This is true. Well, I'll tell you what's upcoming on this podcast, Mike. I have acquired, through various means, the complete Skywalker Saga visual dictionary. Ooh. So each week, I'll pull out a new item, we'll take a look, and we'll explore together the items.
The visual dictionary will play really well on a podcast.
So
what I'm looking at is a spaceship.
What we'll do as a compendium is before the episodes, we'll post on our Instagram, follow our Instagram, the item, so you can look at it, and the page number if you happen to have the book as well.
So what you're saying is a cease and desist is coming our way.
Baby. What's that? I'm giving this book away for free. Yeah, exactly. Get it while you can. I'll be doing full-on page scans. No, I did pick up that, and I picked up the art of The Last Jedi. The Rise of Skywalker art books comes out in May, but I've been doing my research to see traces of these plot points that have been rumored, and a lot of these books were published well in advance, so I'm looking through, finding any little phrase, any kind of ideas. I'm doing my Star Wars research, guys. Now's the time. We have time.
Well, Chris, just remember that if you write on your walls, you'll lose your security deposit. So,
I already have one of those string things. I have one of those string things set up all over the walls. Who is Constable Zuvio?
We was speaking of reading things and gleaning more insight. Everyone said that, Palpatine was kind of part of this the whole time, and when JJ was working on The Force Awakens, he knew that Palpatine was pulling the strings. Clearly, no one told Colin Trevorrow and Derek Connolly because Palpatine was only a hologram. He wasn't actually even part of this
Which
story.
I thought was cool.
Yeah,
I thought that'd be a cool way to use him.
We'll use him as a hologram who's talking to Vader, but what he's saying to Vader is just as important to what he would be saying to Kylo. That's perfect. Do it. Should have been done.
Wow. Do you think they leaked this movie?
You think Colin did? Or
like
Lucasfilm and Disney?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a good
Or the
question.
script?
Well, considering that, John Boyega was just leaving them under beds, I think it's pretty easy to say it's
maybe
out there.
Maybe that was like a secret message from John Boyega. Maybe he actually was like leaving scripts around to say like, hey,
I got one.
Yeah. I don't know. It's exciting. It's fun. The story keeps unfolding piece by piece.
So I'm sure we'll get more, but before we wrap up this podcast, does anybody believe we actually are going to hear what the next Star Wars movie is going to be this January like they said they would, or do you think it's going to just be kind of not mentioned and we'll go on for months without knowing anything?
Well, I mean, this Project Luminous thing is being spoken about. Mm-hmm. So that it may be tied into that.
Yeah, I think that's going to be an all-in campaign from Lucasfilm. I think we're going to see a video game from that. I think they're going to introduce it as kind of the next chapter. This is where the new storybooks and video games and the whole franchise will move. I think they'll probably announce it and we'll get a couple pieces of concept art, but I think they're going to focus on Obi-Wan and Mandalorian for the next few years.
Well, and Cassian Andor, because the Cassian Andor series is going to come out before Obi-Wan, right?
Exactly, and the Cassian... I always forget about that series. I'm excited for that.
Yeah, me too. That's awesome.
I was reading something where Alan Tudyk said that they told him he could just do the voice of K2SO and he didn't have to show up and do the actual bodysuit and the full...
Wow.
And he's like, no, absolutely not. I'm there. I do the motions of that character. But I love it.
You know why? Because Alan Tudyk's a pro.
Yeah.
He's a professional.
Unlike that Pedro Pascal.
Yeah, they're going to have John Wayne's grandson walking around.
Do we know if Garrett Edwards going to be involved in this?
No, it's Tony Gilroy who's doing it.
Okay.
Is he showrunning, really?
Yeah,
Tony
I think
Gilroy?
well, he's writing it, and I thought they said he was directing some of it.
Wow.
It's interesting.
Well, I'm excited for that. But yeah, as far as that, I think we're going to get a very subtle tease about the next large saga installment.
Is anybody else a little bit just saddened by Kathleen Kennedy saying that we might be done with trilogies?
A little bit, but I mean that could come back to that kind of peak theory, right?
Yeah.
Whereas I think we've done it. Lucas and Coppola kind of gave us that gift. I was thinking about The Godfather in relationship to Star Wars, and it's like, oh, that was the original built-in prequel movie.
Moving away from trilogies could be freeing, in terms
you're
of
right.
We'll see. I mean, I don't. The idea of everything having to be a trilogy is a little arbitrary. It kind of was invented by Star Wars, and then everybody just started doing it. But then when all the studios in the last 10 years panicked that they didn't have tentpoles, everything became 4 and 5, and the trilogy idea went away.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I'd be interested in seeing more one-offs, too.
It sounds like that's what they want to do.
Solo didn't work for me, but I thought Rogue One was great.
Yeah.
So I'd love to see more stuff like that. Not everything. It also allows for hopefully a little more risk because it's not this huge buy-in of we're doing a whole trilogy. It's we're doing a movie.
Yeah.
And maybe they'll do stuff where they'll have a $50 million Star Wars movie. It's a little smaller.
That's the thing is I was listening to a podcast about the movie Unstoppable. And they were kind of discussing how Hollywood for a long time is kind of missing this middle ground movie. And I think we talked about this on the podcast as well,
sure.
Where it's a movie's either $10 million as an independent film or $180 million as a blockbuster. And there's this middle ground cinema of these kind of one-off movies. And think of all the great sci-fi movies and things like that we got through the early 2000s and things like that had a big budget, but just they weren't part of a trilogy. They were one-shots. Maybe they got a sequel down the road, but I would like to see Star Wars kind of go in that direction, honestly. I don't think we need this epicness because we've already got that tale. I'd rather just to see shorter stories from the world, and then when they're ready, let's get a saga going. Well, if a saga film in Star Wars should expand the world, it shouldn't close any loops or fill in any plot holes or anything like that. It should be expanding the universe into new realms. And right now, I think the plan is to tell stories about the universe as we know it.
But that's my concern about the Obi-Wan series, is that the Obi-Wan series is not going to be small.
We know how it ends.
Well, we know how it ends, but it's also I don't know that we're going to get this series that we want that's almost quieter, it's less about the action, it's more about the journey he's on mentally.
I think it'll be a little quieter.
I
think we're gonna get Clone Wars style flashbacks of him and Anakin. Okay. And I think we're going to kind of see it from his perspective in the desert.
How crazy would that be if they brought back Hayden for like a pretty regular role?
I have a hunch it's a stunt cast. That's going to be their Baby Yoda.
Give him a shot. You know what I mean? Like,
with a real director?
The dude needs redemption.
Yeah, I think Anakin's going to be their Baby Yoda, though. I think they're going to have a young... Either we're going to see him contemplating himself inside the suit of Darth Vader, or we're going to get flashbacks of him in the Clone War era.
Did you see that they are casting for a young Luke Skywalker?
There you go.
So, but I think people are a little overreacting. The young version of Luke Skywalker might be the kid in the distance that he's monitoring through binoculars.
He's going to be a little kid, yeah. I don't think it's going to be...
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, we knew coming into the Rise of Skywalker that it was going to be a turning point for Star Wars. I didn't know it would be quite like this, but... Hey, we're still... There's so much more to talk about. It's so great to have a podcast with all of you. We miss Sam this week. Sam, come back soon. I'm sure that Chris and Ryan were much happier with you around instead of me. And we'll get you back on this pod soon.
Mike, we hate Sam.
Mike,
we hate Sam. We love you.
Mike, did you hear us trying to start and stop and just talk during this podcast without you?
I thought you edited it.
Oh, yeah, it was heavily edited. No, it's good to have you back, buddy. We're glad to explore this uncharted ground. It's a whole new world in Star Wars, isn't it?
I mean, it gives us a lot to talk about, and I can't complain about that because I get to hang out with you fine fellows.
Hey.
Well, that will do it for this week's edition. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, droidspod@gmail.com. Check us out on YouTube, DroidsPod, the playthroughs of Fallen Order. Give it all a look, a listen, send us your emails, tell us what you thought. Tell us what you thought of the conversation. Do you want to see more in the direction of trilogies? Do you want Trevorrow's script to be made? Are you writing a petition today to get it made? Let us know. That will do it.
Send money to the droids. We'll do it.
We'll make it happen. We'll do it as a fan film.
Sorry, Mike. See, that's it. I broke your outro.
Well, I expect
we need you.
That will do it for the Droids You're Looking For, a Star Wars podcast.
What they throw?
Annie? Babu.
Oh-ho!
Have you seen the girl who does a TikTok doing the Babu Frick voice?
No.
She does it perfectly. It's kind of amazing.
I need to see
That's
this.
Awesome.
It's not Moaning Myrtle, though.
Well, yeah.
Boring conversation anyway.